Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining. Welcome to our first ever CIS series webinar titled CIS Procurement Options. I'm Pat Leahy, Director of Business Development, and I'm joined today by Jonathan Minsky, President of Cayenne. Again, thanks for joining us. I know Justin Trudeau is doing his Throne from the speech at the same time, so it is a little difficult to compete to that, but we'll do our best here today. Over the next hour, we'll discuss the 5 key CIS procurement questions that were addressed in our white paper. We'll get some perspective from the utilities based on their experiences, and we'll conduct a couple of polls with the audience. And then at the end, we'll have a discussion, an open discussion. If you'd like to ask questions during this discussion, please raise your hand or ask a question via the chat function, and we'll do our best to get to you. We'll also be recording this session for future reference, and we'll follow up with a link in the next few days. As you know, we launched the CIS series last month to provide insights to utilities that are either considering going down the CIS replacement or upgrade path, have already begun the journey, or have completed their projects and are now looking back at it. Our goal is to provide a steady flow of information on CIS topics, including optimization, cloud decisions, regulatory considerations, implementation strategies, and best practices. Please check out our CIS series webpage for all related content. Lastly, I wanted to acknowledge a wide range of utilities to this invitation-only webcast. We have gas, electric, water, and sub-metering utilities in attendance, as well as some of the associations that they belong to. I'd also like to welcome our presenters, Linus Medelis, Acting Vice President Customer Service from Electra Utilities, and Kevin Neal, Vice President Customer Operations from Enercare. Jonathan?
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. So our focus today, based on our first CIS series white paper recently released, is how and when to procure for your new or upgraded CIS. We will look at 5 key questions to answer before your utility begins its CIS procurement planning. Your CIS procurement activities will take place during the evaluation and selection phase of the overall project. The 5 key CIS procurement questions are, firstly, procure your CIS software first, or procure the CIS software and a system integrator at the same time. Secondly, procure for a discovery phase only to start, or for the whole implementation. Third, we'll talk about whether you decide about going cloud versus on-premise now or later. And then, do you go with a fixed price or time and materials agreement with your chosen SI? And then finally, we'll discuss how to divide project responsibilities between the utility, SI, and other partners. Note that there are many activities that a utility needs to engage in during this evaluation and selection phase. We will focus our discussion today, though, on the procurement options that a utility has to choose from. But during this time, the utility also needs to finalize the CIS business case, manage the regulatory approval process, establish the internal project governance model, of course, develop the CIS RFPs, including business and technical requirements, IT architecture planning to prepare for the project, and prepare the as-is process maps, if desired. But before we begin, we do need to acknowledge that every utility is, of course, different. Each utility has their own unique factors to consider during the process of replacing an existing CIS. Some examples are the procurement policies specific to your utility, filing and approval processes set out by your local regulator, utility size and internal capabilities. There are large and small utilities, and they all have different needs from a CIS perspective. Your IT strategy within your organization. Your CIS starting point. You may have a 30-year-old CIS that needs replacing, you may want to upgrade an existing CIS. Timelines, constraints, and lessons learned from other IT initiatives. So let's begin with the CIS procurement questions. First one is, do you procure for your CIS software first or procure the CIS software and system integrator at the same time? If you've already decided to upgrade your existing CIS instead of assess the software options in the market, then you can obviously skip this step and go straight to procuring for your system integrator. Also note that not every CIS software requires a separate SI. So in those cases, you wouldn't need to procure for both. So why procure both the software and the SI at the same time? Well, it's one procurement process. So there's significant savings in time and likely cost for your procurement process. You may also get a better upfront view of the total solution to be deployed and the total price of the initiative. So conversely, why procure the software only first and then have a separate procurement for the SI after the software is chosen? Well, many utilities find that focusing on both the CIS software decision and the system integrator decision at the same time can be overwhelming. A utilities evaluation committee will be more focused on the CIS software decision due to its importance. If this is the case, there is sometimes less scrutiny used for choosing the SI. There will also likely be less SI proposals to review once you've chosen your CIS software. The SIs often prefer to know the chosen SI software first as well, so that they can prepare a more accurate and targeted proposal. There are various procurement tools that are available, which can be used for software and/or SI procurement. First off is the CIS market scan. And it's a valuable tool. It's an informal scan of market players, analysis, etc. It's different than the CIS RFI, which is really more of a formal submission with deadlines and refers to the utility's CIS software requirements. But it's not a formal proposal. It's less of a commitment from the vendors. So vendors tend to spend more time on a concrete RFP response. And then, of course, your CIS request for proposal, which is your main procurement tool. So I'd like to now go to a utility perspective, and we have Linus from Electra on the line. And Linus, if we could get your perspective around procuring for the CIS software first or procuring the CIS software and system integrator at the same time.
Thanks, Jonathan. You raised a lot of good points in your earlier piece. I think fundamentally, most organizations should elect to purchase, I would say, the most robust CIS software that has the best fit for their organization. So considering that is the foundational element, my position has been to limit the influence or I want to say a bias an SI may have to a particular software, as it may not be in your actual best interest or represent best fit for your organization. So kind of separating the decision of software from SI allows you or an organization to focus on choosing the right software first, thus potentially removing undue bias from that choice, leaving the choice for an SI based on software implementation experience, application management expertise. So that SI could bring to the table to support a successful implementation. Those are kind of my broad thoughts.
Excellent, thank you, Linus. We're now going to move to our first poll. And the poll will be on this topic. So if we can ask the group, we'll give you about 30 seconds or so. There's only two options. Did you or would you procure for your CIS software first on its own, or procure for both your CIS and SI at the same time? You can select one and we will share the results with the group. So let's see what the group said. I'm not able to see it. There we go. I see the results. So from this group, across utilities, different kinds of utilities, different size utilities, we have 73% of the group said procure for the CIS software first on its own. And of course, 27% that said procure for both the CIS and the SI at the same time. Excellent. Well, we can come back to this in more detail in the discussion group, in the discussion at the end. Now, Kayan's view and our recommendation that we stated in the white paper, which aligns with the poll results and Linus's comments, is that if time permits, a utility should first choose its CIS software with an RFP focused on the utility's specific software requirements. The utility will then be in a good position to prepare its CIS SI RFP and focus on that important selection with the vendors that specialize in that chosen software. So let's now move to our second CIS procurement question. Do you procure for a system integrator to lead you through the discovery phase only to start, or do you procure for the whole implementation right away? Let's begin by defining what we mean by a discovery phase. So some call discovery or refer to discovery also as design, analysis, or blueprint. They're all slightly different meanings depending on the methodology. But a discovery phase typically consists of three things: a business discovery, which is things like detailed business requirements, fit gap analysis, detailed functional designs, high-level business processes, and then strategies for training and change management. So those are the typical business discovery type items. Then from a technical discovery, there are things like detailed technical requirements, strategies for configuration, data conversion, testing, and environments, possibly even a proof of concept during the discovery phase. And then the project management discovery, which is really planning for the implementation phase. So things like project plan, resource plan, cost estimate, and risk register for the implementation of the software. So now let's go back to the question. Why release a system integrator RFP for the discovery phase only to start? Well, it reduces the financial risk because you're not committing to the SI for the entire project scope, provides an opportunity to understand the SI's capabilities through the discovery phase, provides the ability to change your system integrator for the implementation phase if you're not satisfied. And also, because the discovery phase deliverables will provide more clarity of the project requirements and scope, a revised project estimate at the end of the discovery phase should result in fewer change orders and reduced risk of cost overrun. So then let's look at why release one SI RFP for the whole implementation. Well, a single SI across all project phases should bring consistency and delivery control to the project. Time, cost, and effort will be saved by avoiding separate procurement processes for discovery and implementation. So I'd like to bring on Kevin now from Enercare. From his perspective, Kevin, if you don't mind, your perspective, if you can talk about the discovery phase only or procuring for the whole implementation from your SI.
Yeah, for sure, Jonathan. So I'll just give specifics on our situation. It's obviously dependent on every organization, so there really isn't a right size fits all, but I'll describe kind of what our organization went through. So even though, we went through the entire RFP process. So when I mean RFP, we actually had enough requirements. We actually knew what we were doing. So we actually put the RFP together as if it was going to go for the entire project. However, we asked the vendors or the SIs to specifically bid upon the discovery phase only, as well provide some type of indicative pricing for the implementation phase. So we are trying to refine the scope just in the discovery phase. And the analogy I want to bring here is it's as if you're building a house or you're constructing a building. You're basically trying to get that architecture diagram, etc. So when you're going through discovery, you're gonna realize things in your existing business processes don't fit within the new software or other things. That could be quite costly on the implementation phase, or you can de-scope things as well. However, if you scoped in the entire implementation, the SI is going to make assumptions around, how standards implementation, et cetera, based upon the information you provided them. It's a lot easier in our view. We went for the discovery only phase. It was, in our view, a lot easier to make those assessments on business process, what needed to change, and then make changes and get some type of functional specs out on the market. So by allowing us then to bid those to market, we're able to contain that cost and actually get a bit tighter estimate on our implementation phase.
Excellent, thank you, Kevin. That's great, and that aligns with the Cayenne recommendation that we had on the white paper. If time permits, and that's an important piece here, start by procuring for a discovery phase system integrator. So moving then to the next slide, we see, most CIS solutions are now offering their software in some kind of cloud format. We can have a very in-depth conversation about the pros and cons about going cloud, and what are the different things to take into account in your cloud decision. But we're actually going to hold that conversation to another time. We're planning on having a future white paper specifically on that topic. For today, we're focusing on when make your cloud versus on-premise decision. Utilities have, in our opinion, really 3 different times when they can make their cloud versus on-premise decision. Let's discuss when it makes most sense for your utility to make this important decision. So first is before the procurement process. And at that time, it allows your utility to do their due diligence to vet the various cloud options, regardless of the CIS software application. You can also use this time to assess your utility's own cloud readiness based on your IT roadmap, your business and operational cloud readiness, and the constraints that are unique to your specific jurisdiction. Also, if your cloud decision is made before procurement, it allows your utility to focus its evaluation efforts on the CIS software itself and the SI, just less decisions to make at one time. So those are the reasons for making this decision before the procurement process. But how about during the procurement process? Well, it allows for software vendors to provide multiple bids outlining the advantages and disadvantages of their cloud versus on-premise solutions, including the pricing for each option. So you actually get to see what the vendors are recommending, the software vendors themselves, if you do it during the procurement process. It also allows your utility to manage all procurement-related decisions at the same time, which ultimately saves you time. And then your third option is during the discovery phase, which allows for a thorough assessment with your selected SI of whether the chosen CIS software should be cloud or on-premise, assuming that, of course, that the chosen CIS software has cloud and on-premise options. The decision should be made as early in the discovery phase as possible so that the SI can tailor their designs appropriately. And Kevin, I'll come back to you again because I know this is something that Enercare went through last year. If you can elaborate a little bit on when and how Enercare made their decision around cloud versus on-premise.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Jonathan. I think you made a key distinction there is the availability of a cloud option with the software. So in our perspective, we were an upgrade. So the CIS we were on actually did have a cloud option. So that actually, we did do that during the discovery phase. We actually engaged the SI to actually, as part of their deliverables, to actually do that assessment. And the key thing is with the CIS system we're looking at, not necessarily all the functionality was transferred into the cloud. Now clouds continue to evolve as well, but we wanted just to make sure existing functionality on-prem is actually being transferable into the cloud as well. I'm just going to give one more perspective. So that we designed that in the discovery phase. If I was doing an upgrade, and this is probably more for everybody else on the call, if I was doing a brand new replacement, I would probably do that as part of this selection process. Have the software vendors, compare and contrast their cloud offerings versus the on-prem offerings. We were just doing an upgrade, so it was a bit easier for us because it was either stay on-prem with this path or go cloud this path.
Perfect. Thanks, Kevin. And that's right. It depends on your situation, and what the right time is for you. But what we're going to do is conduct our second poll of the audience to see what people are thinking. So as the poll comes up here, the question is: when did you or would you decide about going cloud versus on-premise for your CIS solution? And again, we have the three options: decide before procuring for the CIS software, decide during the CIS software procurement process, or decide during the discovery phase of the project. So we'll give you a moment to respond to that. The decision itself of whether you're going cloud versus on-premise isn't necessarily relevant here. It's more around when would you make the decision. All right, the results are in, and the second choice is what came up. Although it's we certainly got votes across the board here. 54% of the group said decide during the CIS software procurement process, which, as Kevin said, allows the software vendors to really share their point of view on cloud versus on-premise for their particular product. 31% said decide during the discovery phase of the project, and 15% of the group said decide before procuring for the CIS software. Again, all good options here. Kayan's recommendation in the white paper is really make the decision as early as possible, so that your utility can focus on all the other critical decisions that need to be made. But it will very much depend on your situation. Like Kevin said, if it's an upgrade or a replacement project, and so forth. So there's a lot of things to consider there. Okay, let's go then to an age-old question. What's better, fixed price or time and materials for your system integrator contract? And for this one, we'll switch up the order a little bit. Linus, if I can call on you for your perspective from Electra on fixed price versus time and material agreements for your system integrator.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Electra and its predecessors have grappled with this question quite often. My decisions related to kind of the procurement model of fixed or time and material it's been highly influenced by the scope of the engagement. So the broader the scope, in my mind, I lean more towards a fixed price contract. So on the surface, the fixed price model can provide you with greater cost certainty, but the process needs rigor, and to ensure scope and accountabilities are clearly defined and they're understood by both parties. So the safety of the fixed price contract comes with reality. It comes with transparency, a good understanding of risks, and there also has to be some provision for scope creep with controls, and I would say stage gates that are kind of proactive and predictive of change requests. So I think the most important piece here, once you've engaged with an SI, that isn't the time to define your guiding principles of your implementation. It needs to be organized with cooperative between the SI and the utility, cooperative pre-planning. So the broader the SI accountabilities will help. It also, as part of the contracting process, it will help pressure a measure of SI diligence regarding requirements up front, supporting that fixed price contracting.
Excellent, thank you, Linus. Yeah, lots of good advice in there, and of course it certainly does depend on the situation and your relationship with the integrator. I'll go through some of the kind of standard, what we think are advantages of each of the two options, and we can discuss as a group later on your feedback of this as well. But the advantages of a fixed price SI contract, I mean, the biggest one is price certainty, as Lynn said. It reduces the danger of cost runaway, and that's the biggest reason for fixed price. It instills more urgency to meet deadlines. There's more incentive on the SI to resource the project with higher skilled people. Often it results in better scope definition upfront and management throughout the project. But like Lynn said, you have to have those right processes in place, well-defined, worked out with your system integrator to ensure that that is the case. So what are the advantages then of time and materials for your SI contract? The utility has more control over the SI resourcing, at least theoretically, they would. Less contract confrontations, more of a partnership with the SI, again, theoretically, because you're kind of doing this together. Will cost less if the project comes in exactly as estimated. So therefore, there's the risk uplift that the SI adds to its fixed price wouldn't be realized in the time and materials. Now, how often is a CIS project delivered exactly on to the day on time? That's probably another discussion in itself. And the project likely will be over a longer duration, realistically, if it's time and materials. So those are some of the advantages of the two. In addition to Linus's points, Cayenne recommends going with a fixed price. Just generally, all things considered, going with a fixed price SI contract because it'll give you the most price certainty, which is a big reason why we recommend going in that direction. So then the fifth question, the fifth procurement question relates to the right division of project responsibilities between the various players. So we typically find that things like organizational change management, business process design, end user training, user acceptance testing are led by the utility during a CIS implementation. This allows the CIS to focus on, the SI to focus on the technical and system activities, while the utility focuses on the impacts to their people and processes. Some SIs are capable, though, to provide support in these areas if needed, but we're finding that typically the SIs are asking the client to lead some of these areas to actually keep their costs down and stay within their expected budget. The other aspect to discuss here is if and how you allow your vendors to partner with each other, including other SIs or even software vendors like a customer portal. And I'd like to bring Kevin back in here. Kevin, from your perspective on your project that is underway, what's your point of view around the SI, multiple partners? It could be even multiple software vendors. To kind of how do you manage that as a group?
Yeah, so everybody can appreciate there is so many balls in the air in these CIS projects. You typically are going to engage probably 3 to 4 different organizations to help you out. One of the key things we use is like the RACI tool. It really identifies who's responsible, accountable, who am I consulting with, and who do I need to inform. So we use the RACI tool. Anybody can Google that. You can find out what that's all about if you don't know. That's one thing we do to make sure there's clear accountabilities. The other kind of test I like to do is I generally don't like to have a vendor report to another vendor. I think that opens you up to SLAs and some contractual arrangements. So for example, I wouldn't have the main SI and then have maybe some independent consultants be independently accountable to them. I try to have as many accountabilities either directly into the utility SI, or if I couldn't get away from that, if I had maybe the SI doesn't have the right resources, they need to go contract. I would actually ask that SI to contract directly with them. And therefore, you're only managing 1 or 2 direct contracts. You just don't want to be in between 2 SIs fighting over deliverables or timelines. And ultimately, you're either paying a change request, or if you're in time and materials, clock's ticking and you're paying for it. I do like to try to keep that as clean as possible.
That certainly makes sense. And the theory "one throat to choke" comes to mind when you say that, and it's not necessarily the nicest view, but that's kind of the point here is having one key SI, one key contact that manages the majority of the project and the vendors beneath them. And that aligns with Kayan's recommendation. Really, it's twofold. Realistically identify what responsibilities you can lead on your own, and then clearly define the system integrator scope in the RFP. So that's kind of the first part. And then the second is allow SIs to partner in their RFP responses to bring the most qualified team possible to the project, but make sure there is one prime. And I think that aligns with what Kevin was saying. So those are the 5 questions. Let's now do a summary of the key takeaways for your CIS procurement options. But of course, we can't forget that every utility is different, and therefore you need to choose the path that works best for your situation. But based on the information we've heard today, the white paper, the perspectives from the utilities that are online with us here today, we recommend the following. First of all, choosing your software first, then follow with a second RFP focused on choosing your system integrator. Secondly, choose your SI for the discovery phase first and allow for the option of staying with that SI or going back out to the market. Third, make your CIS cloud versus on-premise decision as early in the process as possible. Fourth, use a fixed price system integrator contract. And fifth, as we just discussed, allow your SI to partner with other vendors, but have one prime SI, and also select key areas for your company to lead on its own. So we'd now like to open it up for discussion. And if you can either raise your hand, or it might even be easier to actually type in a question or comment in the chat box, whatever you prefer. I do see some questions coming through here. I'll start with one of the questions I see coming through online here. And the question is, how much can you condense the procurement process if you're just doing an upgrade? So I'll take a cut at this, and then Kevin, maybe I'll ask your opinion as well. But you typically need about 10 months from beginning to end to procure for your CIS software and then your SI separately. So if you only need to procure for your SI because your software is already chosen and you're doing an upgrade, you'll probably need about 6 months just for that process. Kevin, let me go to you to see if you have any opinion on that question. Again, the question is, how much can you condense the procurement process if you're just doing an upgrade?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because that's the situation we were in. It was an upgrade. I think it's also, you do have to spend the time, so you probably can condense it a little bit. You probably can get down to maybe 3 months. I think internally you're going to probably need to spend at least 3 months looking at some of the existing functions. Even an upgrade, whether you're doing a technical, you're not getting those functional benefits. So you really want to see, okay, what's the new functional features that are with the most recent or whatever version you're targeting to go to, because that will have some impacts to your business as well. So I think 3 months probably going through exercise is probably enough. Could be more, but end to end you're looking at minimum 6 months, because you got to give these vendors enough time to respond as well. And I think minimum of a month, given the size of some of these RFPs.
Right, exactly. Yep, good points. Okay, another question's coming through here. I don't see any hands up yet, But another question coming through here. How often is the discovery SI different from the implementation SI? What are the implications if different? Linus, maybe I'll ask you to provide your perspective on this. I'll read the question again for you. How often is the discovery SI different from the implementation SI? And what are the implications if they are different? And I know Electra, of course, has some experience in this area.
Yeah, I've done it differently in different initiatives, but the most recent one, we actually went out for both of them independently. So we did the Discovery SI. And as part of that engagement, we made crystal clear that the findings and the output from that discovery needed to be clear and concise, so any vendor then could take those outputs and leverage them. And we actually, used them during the RFP process in general as we were the SI. So there's an option. You can go with the Discovery SI and say that they are restrict from putting in a bid to participate as the implementation SI, or you can keep them open to that group as well. I found it, if it is open and they are able to bid in implementation, they typically do have an advantage because they have the discovery. They actually understand how a utility may operate and how decisions are made and the governance around those things. So they may have some advantage. But I found that although there was that in our case, our discovery site did not do implementation.
Thanks, Linus. Unfortunately, you were a little bit choppy there. I'm not sure if it was just me or everybody across the board there, but I think you made some points in there that I certainly did hear, and things like whether you allow the SI that's in the discovery phase to even participate or propose for the rest of the implementation is an interesting thought and something that we didn't talk about earlier, and I know you just brought up there as consideration. So that's certainly a good one. If the discovery phase SI is allowed to propose for the implementation phase, they would obviously have an advantage in the process. They understand the designs that they put together. They were privy to a lot of the details, but it could come down to price. Price is a major factor in these, and I know we can all relate to that. And you may have different skill sets that align for discovery phase than for implementation phase, and maybe some SIs are better suited for the discovery than the implementation itself. And so, all things to consider. If you do decide to switch SIs, you do need to give the new SI some time to learn the business and reassess the designs that were created by the other company. So you do need to kind of take that into account, of course, as well.
Jonathan, there's a question from the group. The question is, what's the best approach to select pricing option for the discovery phase? And that question being fixed or time and materials when you go out just for the discovery.
Right. So, I think there's fixed price, there's time and materials. The options could also include time and materials to some kind of cap. There are different options. We've found that generally across the clients that we've worked with, fixed price, for the reasons we talked about earlier, it kind of gives you the price certainty. It gives you the duration, more certainty around the duration. That fixed price is usually the way to go. But I think if you're going to go time and materials for anything, it would probably be for the discovery phase, because The SI doesn't know, they're discovering, right, and designing. But by the end of that phase, they should be able to, whether it's that company or a different company, they should be able to come up with a firm bid to implement the rest of it. So, all that to say, I think we typically see fixed price first and most often, but if you're going to go time and materials, it would probably be in the discovery phase, is what I would say. Do you see any other questions there, Pat?
No, that's good. Thanks, Jonathan.
Any other folks that have been through the CIS implementation that are that have gone through it and want to kind of share any of the learnings around the procurement process? Whether it's we've got folks from Liberty, from Durham, from Recent Appeal that have gone through this. Just put your hand up and we can unmute you for your comments, of course, or questions.
Jonathan, John from Liberty actually has a question. I don't know if it might be better to, and we're calling John out. I apologize, John, but is there a way, John, you can ask this question yourself? If we could unmute you. You're unmuted, John, if you wouldn't mind asking that question to Jonathan, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, John.
Okay. Hey there. Yeah, so I mean, maybe I mean, if you want, I can describe a little bit of what we've been through, and then I guess I think there is a specific point around the extent to which the utility wants to buy a, whatever you want to call it, kind of best practice, pre-configured solution kind of thing. I mean, in our case, it's SAP. So I mean, we chose software first. We're deploying SAP, like basically wall-to-wall SAP. So the ERP, the EAM, and the CIS solution. So it's obviously very large scope and larger than just CIS. Although I think my comments apply even if you were doing CIS alone. So we chose the software first and chose SAP, then went out to bid for the implementation, and we bid the entire scope, including, I think, what you would call the discovery, or at least the sort of design phase, as well as the subsequent phases in one large fixed price contract. So we had requirements documented in kind of gory detail, and included those requirements in the RFP. But we were certainly attempting to get an integrator to bid a kind of a pre-configured SAP solution, and essentially satisfy us that their solution would meet the requirements and get them contractually bound to do so. So I think it would have been challenging, I think, given what we were trying to achieve, to bid a discovery phase ahead of the implementation. I mean, unless the discovery was really trying to nail down scope more than requirements, in other words, business process scope and application scope. But I'm obviously curious as to others' perspective. That's the path that we headed down. I'd also say that, I mean, I think the other big learning point from our experience was we hired a third party to help us create the statement of work that the implementation is being executed under, with some very clear obligations around essentially how the implementation was managed, how the progress was measured, and consequences for the integrator if they fell behind on various metrics or recurring deliverables and stuff like that, which we're almost a year into this now, has proven to be pretty, I'd say a very important component of what we included in the contract. So I guess I'll stop there to comment and a question, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, John. Some really good points there. Liberty, like you suggested, is maybe more unique in some ways in the complexities that you're working through on your project, and of course the multiple facets in addition to just CIS that you're taking on. So to have a discovery phase would probably be a little bit more difficult. So certainly your comments certainly make a lot of sense there. Any questions or comments from the group to John based on his experience and lessons learned from Liberty? Okay, I do have another question that's come up here. Thank you, John. I do have another question that's come up, and it says, how does this procurement model apply to multiple utilities trying to employ a shared service model? Which is a good question. Shared service models are certainly more complex. We've seen in Ontario there have been a number of attempts. I'm not sure how many successful attempts, but a number of attempts that have where utilities have tried to come together to have a shared service model to both bring the cost down and allow for potentially smaller utilities to bundle their fees together to be able to afford an application that maybe they wouldn't have been able to afford. But really it requires a lot more time up front putting the governance model in place, so that when you get to the point of contract negotiation, that it's pretty clear between the parties, how the decision would be made, and when the decision would be made, what utility would be receiving the product first, or is it sort of a combined implementation all at once, et cetera, et cetera. So certainly a lot of complexities around shared service, but if you're able to pull it off, there's certainly a lot of benefits to it as well. That was a good question. Any other questions or comments? Pat, I know you can see the dashboard there. Anything else coming in from the group?
No, I don't see anything, Jonathan.
Okay.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. On behalf of Jonathan and I and the entire Cayenne team, I just wanted to personally thank all the attendees. Of course, thanks for attending and also participating. And would really like to thank Linus and Kevin. Thanks for presenting and jumping in when called upon. We really appreciate the feedback, and I'm sure all the other utilities can relate and appreciate it as well. As mentioned, we will be sharing the link to these slides and the recorded presentation, so we'll get that around in the next couple of days. Wanted to let you know, as I mentioned earlier, with the CIS series, we'll continue to produce content and and drive discussion and create forums to do so. We're looking to get a white paper, our next white paper out by the end of the year, but we may have to go back and edit that out of this recording if we don't deliver on that. So, but that is our goal at this point. And then, you know, obviously we look forward to seeing you at future CIS events when we put these webinars together to support the content we're producing. So on that note, have a great rest of the day. You know, unfortunately, I have to say this, but stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.